I want to be clear up front. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I grew up in a noisy house, worked night jobs most of my adult life, and I've spent plenty of time alone. But this story changed a few things for me. Enough that I don't go places like this anymore. Enough that I still feel a knot in my stomach when I think about snow and the sound of someone calling my name. This happened in 2018, right before Christmas. At the time, I was living in a small town called Ridgeway, working late shifts at a shipping warehouse. My life was mostly sleep, work, repeat. I was exhausted all the time and honestly a little numb. That's when Mara, a close friend I'd known since college, called me out of the blue. Mara had just gone through a rough divorce and needed to get out of the city for a bit. She didn't want crowds, family drama, or people asking questions she didn't feel like answering. She wanted quiet, trees, snow, somewhere she could breathe. So we rented a cabin together for a week just before Christmas. It was out near a place called Cold Creek Valley, way out in the hills near the edge of eastern Tennessee. The listing described it as peaceful and remote. That should have been my first warning. A cabin itself looked harmless enough. One room, a small kitchen, a fireplace, and just enough furniture to make it feel cozy instead of abandoned. But there was one detail we laughed about when we arrived. No indoor bathroom. Just a wooden outhouse about 20 yards behind the cabin, tucked near the trees. We shrugged it off. It was supposed to be an adventure, right? The first couple of days were fine. We cooked simple food, played cards, listened to music, and talked late into the night. The snow made everything quiet in that heavy way, like the world had been wrapped in a thick blanket. It felt peaceful at first. On Christmas Eve, we stayed up late drinking and joking around. We tried to watch a movie, but the Wi-Fi cut out halfway through. Mara fell asleep on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin. I went to bed feeling relaxed, actually happy for once. That night, I woke up suddenly around 3 in the morning. No dream, no noise. Just that uncomfortable, wide-awake feeling you get when your body demands something now. I tried to ignore it, but there was no chance. So I got dressed, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped outside. The cold was shocking. Not just cold, but sharp, like it wanted to hurt you. The snow crunched under my boots, loud and brittle. There was no wind, no animals, no insects. Just silence, so thick it felt like pressure in my ears. As I walked past the corner of the cabin, I heard a voice. "Evan?" It came from the trees. It sounded like Mara. I froze. My breath came out in a cloud, and suddenly it felt way too loud. I aimed the flashlight toward the tree line, half expecting to see her standing there barefoot and confused. There was nothing, just trees and snow. Then the voice spoke again. "Hey, can you come here for a second?" Same voice, same gentle tone, but something about it felt wrong. Not angry, not rushed, just flat, like someone repeating a line they'd practiced. I turned and looked back at the cabin. Through the frosted window, I could see Mara inside, asleep on the couch, blanket still wrapped around her. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer the voice. I just said, louder than I meant to, "That's not funny," even though no one was laughing. I rushed to the outhouse, did what I had to do, and hurried back, never taking my eyes off the trees. The whole time, I felt like something was watching me. Not moving, just waiting. Inside the cabin, the air felt strange, too still. Mara was awake now, standing by the window. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she asked quietly. We didn't sleep after that. We sat by the fire until morning, talking about anything except what we'd heard. Every now and then, one of us would glance at the door or the windows, just to be sure nothing was there. The next day, we stayed inside until late afternoon. Eventually, the cabin started to feel small, like the walls were inching closer. Mara said she needed air and offered to take the trash to the shed behind the cabin. She was gone longer than she should have been. When I stepped outside to look for her, I found the trash bag lying in the snow, torn open. Mara was nowhere in sight. I was 14 when this happened, back in the winter of 2014, and I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. That year, my mom decided we should spend Christmas somewhere quiet. She said we needed a break. No traffic, no phones buzzing every 5 seconds, no neighbors dropping by unannounced. Her solution was my stepdad's older brother, Ron. I barely knew him. I'd met him maybe twice before, and both times he barely spoke. Ron lived way up north, past a tiny town called Hollow Creek, on a wooded hill that locals only referred to as the Rise. There wasn't an address you could plug into a GPS. You followed a narrow road until it stopped, then kept going up a frozen dirt path until you hit his house. He built it himself, piece by piece, and it looked like it too. Crooked porch, thick wooden shutters, no outside lights. It was me, my mom, and my stepbrother Jake. Jake was 15, loud, always bored, and always looking for something to mess with. I was younger and quieter, but I still thought the idea of snow and isolation sounded kind of cool. At least at first. The first night was fine. Cold, but fine. The second day dragged on forever. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell service. The TV only picked up static. Ron didn't seem to notice or care. He sat in his chair by the window, listening to an old radio that only played weather updates and emergency alerts. He didn't smile much, didn't ask us questions, just nodded when spoken to. By afternoon, Jake was pacing like a caged animal. That's when he suggested checking out the shed behind the house. The shed sat half buried in snow, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, it smelled like oil, damp wood, and something stale. We poked around until Jake pulled out a rolled-up bundle of thick gray fabric tied with a faded rope. It was a portable ice shelter, one of those pop-up ones people use when fishing on frozen lakes. It looked almost brand new. No tears, no stains. The tag was still attached. When we asked Ron about it, he barely reacted. He said he'd traded for it years ago and never used it. That was it. No warning. No explanation. Jake got excited immediately. He begged to set it up outside and sleep in it like real campers. After a lot of convincing, Mom agreed, as long as we stayed close to the house. We set it up near the edge of the trees, where the ground flattened out. Once it popped open, I noticed how thick the walls were. Heavy vinyl, no windows, just one zipper flap. Inside, sound felt muted, like the world got quieter when you stepped in. That night, we bundled up and crawled inside with flashlights and snacks. At first, it was fun. We joked around, whispered stories, laughed too loud. Then the forest went silent. No wind, no branches creaking, no distant animal sounds. Just nothing. I woke up sometime later with that awful feeling you get when you know something's wrong but can't explain why. Jake was asleep beside me, breathing slow and heavy. I lay there staring at the dark ceiling when I heard it. Something brushed the side of the tent. Not a bump, not a scrape, more like a slow drag. Like fingers sliding across plastic. I held my breath. The sound came again, closer this time. The wall pushed inward slightly, smooth and steady, like something leaning its weight against it. I could see the shape move, stretching the vinyl before easing away. I whispered Jake's name, but he didn't wake up. I finally worked up the nerve to unzip the door and step outside. The cold hit me hard. I shined my flashlight around the tent, then the ground. The snow was perfect, untouched, no tracks, no marks, nothing. I didn't sleep after that. 2 days later, we went back out to grab our stuff. The tent was collapsed. Not crushed, torn. 3 long gashes ran down the back wall. They weren't clean cuts. The vinyl looked pressed in, like something had dragged along it with force, but stopped short of ripping all the way through. Ron came out, stared at it for a long time, then said it must have been falling debris, even though nothing else around it was disturbed. That night, he burned it. Didn't ask us. Didn't say a word. Just stood there watching it melt and twist in the fire. Early Christmas morning, I woke up to a sound that made my stomach drop. It started as a low hum, like electricity running through the floor. Then it rose into this sharp, thin scream. Not human, not animal, like a machine trying to copy pain. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. When I mentioned it later, Ron told me the mountain makes noises, and not to worry. That evening, it happened again. Louder, closer. The windows shook. Jake started crying. Ron locked every door and nailed the shutters shut. He told us not to look outside, no matter what we heard. We stayed 2 more nights. Every night, the sound came once, always from a different direction. We left as soon as the road cleared. I went back the next fall, alone. Ron never answered the door. His phone rang inside the house. The shed was open. Inside, on the wall where the tent had been, were 3 deep gouges carved into the wood. They looked fresh. I haven't been back since. And I don't camp anymore. It happened in the winter of 2014, right before Christmas, back when I was 17 and thought I had a decent handle on what was scary and what wasn't. Turns out I was wrong about that. Very wrong. That year, a local community center I volunteered with signed up for a holiday outreach trip. Not a church thing this time. It was run by a small nonprofit that helped families in hard-to-reach places. The destination was somewhere called Pine Hollow Run. I'd never heard of it, and when I asked around, nobody else had either. It wasn't on most maps. Not really a town. More like a handful of old houses scattered along a mountain road that twisted like it was trying to shake you off. We packed up 2 days before Christmas Eve. Food boxes, blankets, cheap toys, hygiene kits, the basics. I didn't sign up because I felt heroic. Honestly, I just didn't want to sit at home listening to my older brother complain while our parents argued about money. Plus, my coworker Nate was going, and he promised it would be an easy trip. It wasn't. When we got there, the snow was already bad. Thick, heavy, quiet snow that swallowed sound. The kind that makes everything feel wrong, even when nothing's happening. The coordinator split us into small teams. Some stayed back at the lodge to sort donations. Others were sent out to deliver supplies to homes too far apart to walk between. I got paired with a middle-aged man named Carl and his sister-in-law, Denise. I barely knew them. Carl talked nonstop about weather patterns and engines. Denise barely spoke at all, except to fuss over my gloves or tug my hat lower like she was scared my ears might fall off. Carl drove an old green truck with a cracked windshield and a snowplow that screamed every time he lowered it. We made it up the mountain until the road disappeared under drifts too deep to push through. That's when Carl stopped and popped the tailgate. Inside were sleds. Real wooden sleds with rope handles, worn smooth from years of use. They were stacked with boxes wrapped in plastic to keep the snow out. Carl handed me one. "You're young," he said. "You'll be fine." I should have argued. I didn't. My list had 3 houses. The last one had a note next to it, written in shaky handwriting. The name Evan Pike was circled hard, like whoever wrote it pressed the pen too long. Next to it was a message. "Says he'll meet halfway if you're late." I checked my phone. It was already past noon. No signal, obviously. The trail started out normal enough. Narrow, but packed down. Trees on both sides, branches sagging under the weight of snow. The first 2 houses went fine. Quiet people, tired smiles, hands that shook a little when they took the boxes. Then the trail dipped lower into the woods, and things started to feel off. The snow got deeper. The sled kept catching on rocks hidden underneath. The forest grew tighter, darker. The air felt thick, like it didn't want me there. I remember thinking how quiet it was. No birds, no wind. Just the soft scrape of wood on snow and my own breathing. That's when I noticed the lights. At first, I thought they were reflections. Little flashes of red, green, blue, like Christmas lights caught in branches. But every time I looked straight at them, they vanished. Not faded, vanished, like someone had flicked them off. Then I stepped into a clearing. The snow there was perfect, too perfect. Smooth and untouched, like it had just fallen seconds ago. No footprints. No animal tracks. No broken branches. Nothing. I stopped walking. That's when I saw the decorations. They hung from the trees all around the clearing. Homemade stuff, strings of dried berries, twisted wire shapes. Little dolls made from straw and cloth scraps, their arms stretched out like they were reaching for something. Some were tied low. Others were way up high, higher than anyone could reach without climbing. That was when my stomach dropped. And then I noticed him. He stood near the far edge of the clearing, half shadowed by the trees. He hadn't walked in. He was just there. A man in a dark coat, scarf pulled up around his neck. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Snow fell around him, but none of it seemed to stick. I tried to sound normal when I spoke. "Hey, are you Evan?" He didn't answer. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw what he was holding. It was a bundle of evergreen branches, tied together with something dark and twisted. When I realized it was old barbed wire, my hands went numb. The metal was rusted, sharp, biting into the branches like it wanted to draw blood. The man smiled. Just a little. Not happy. Not angry. Like he'd been waiting. I turned away, pretending my sled strap was loose. I told myself I was overreacting. When I looked back, he was closer. I didn't think any more after that. I just left. I walked fast at first, then faster. The sled bounced behind me, nearly tipping over. I heard something moving behind me. Not footsteps. Something dragging, slow, wet. I dropped the sled and ran. The trail split, and I picked the widest path without thinking. My chest burned. My ears rang. Then I saw a building ahead, an old maintenance cabin. 1 story, dark windows. The door opened. Inside was cold and empty. I locked it and hid behind a cabinet, shaking so hard I thought my teeth would crack. The doorknob turned. The door opened. He walked in, calm as ever, and placed the bundle of branches on the floor, right in the center, like a gift. Then he left. This happened back in 2016, a few days before Christmas. I remember the year clearly because my phone was cracked, my car heater barely worked, and winter felt meaner than usual. I was staying at my former stepdad's cabin with my old college friend Mason. We weren't related, but we'd known each other long enough that we felt like family. He needed help watching the place while his parents flew out to Arizona to visit his mom's sister. They asked us to keep an eye on the cabin and make sure it looked lived in. The cabin sat on a wooded rise called Black Hollow Ridge, about 20 minutes outside a small town named Pinewater. If you blinked, you'd miss the town. One grocery store, one gas station, and a lot of trees that felt like they leaned in too close. Mason grew up there. I spent summers with him in high school, so the area didn't feel strange to me. We knew the animals, deer, coyotes, the occasional bear. We knew the locals too. People waved, but didn't stop to talk much. Nothing about the place scared us at first. The only thing his parents asked us to do was decorate for Christmas. His mom loved traditions. She'd left a handwritten note on the counter with a short list. String lights on the porch, wreaths inside, and one thing written in thicker ink like it mattered more. Don't forget the Santa in the tool shed. That Santa was hard to describe. It was carved out of solid wood, almost as tall as me. Old, heavy. The paint was chipped in places, and the red coat looked darker than it should have, like it had soaked something up over the years. The face was the worst part. The smile didn't reach the eyes. The eyes were carved deep and shadowy, so no matter where you stood, it felt like it was looking at you. Mason hated it, said it freaked him out as a kid. His mom insisted it was festive. The shed sat uphill behind the cabin, half dug into the slope. You couldn't see it from any window. The path back there was narrow and icy, and the shed itself was packed with tools, boxes, old furniture, and junk no one had touched in years. I went alone to get the Santa. Bad choice. By the time I dragged it out, my gloves were soaked and my arms ached. Snow slid down my collar and melted against my skin. I remember muttering to myself, telling the stupid thing it better be worth it. I set it by the front steps, just like the note said, lantern in its carved hand, facing the driveway. That's when I felt it. That feeling you get when someone's watching you. I looked up toward the trees. About 40 feet out, right at the edge of the woods, stood a man. Long brown coat. Hood up. No hat. He wasn't moving at all. Not pacing. Not shifting. Just standing there, half blended with the trees. At first I thought maybe it was a neighbor or someone hunting. But something felt off. People around there usually made noise. Crunching snow. A cough. Something. This guy was silent. I stared for a few seconds, then turned to shout Mason's name. When I looked back, the man was gone. No footsteps. No movement. Just trees and falling snow. I told myself it was nothing. Shadows, bad lighting. I went inside and locked the door without even thinking about it. That night felt normal enough. We made chili, watched dumb horror movies, laughed at the bad acting. Around 10, I glanced out the window toward the porch. The Santa wasn't facing forward anymore. It had turned slightly, angled toward the yard. I asked Mason if he moved it. He laughed and said no. We went outside together. In the snow were 2 long scrape marks, curved like someone had twisted the Santa in place. No footprints. Just those grooves. Mason thought I was messing with him. I could tell he didn't fully believe me, so I dropped it. The next morning, the The Santa was back in its original position, perfectly centered, facing forward. Later that day, I went to grab firewood and noticed something behind the shed. Bare footprints, small, human, no shoes. The steps were uneven, like whoever made them limped or walked strangely. One foot pointed inward. The prints went about 20 feet and then stopped. No fading, no exit trail, just untouched snow beyond them. That night, the porch light turned on by itself. The Santa was gone. I followed the drag marks into the woods until they stopped at a tree. The Santa stood there, upright, facing me. I didn't touch it. I walked away. Inside, Mason told me he'd heard tapping on the upstairs window. Slow, careful, like fingernails testing the glass. The next morning, the Santa was back again. A neighbor later mentioned seeing someone in a brown coat pacing the ridge after midnight. That night, we heard tapping on the back door. When I looked, someone was standing there. It was Evan, an old acquaintance, someone who'd crossed lines years ago, someone who shouldn't have known where we were. We called the police. When they arrived, Evan was gone. Footprints circled the cabin, over and over, and the Santa stood on the porch, smiling that carved smile. We left early the next morning. Neither of us spoke about it again. But every Christmas, I still think about that Santa, and I still wonder who really moved it. I was 21 when I agreed to watch over my aunt's Christmas tree lot outside Marlow during winter break. The lot sat off a winding back road, a couple of miles from anything that could be called a neighborhood. My aunt had run it for years, a seasonal operation from late November through New Year's. She usually hired local kids to help, but by the week before Christmas, most of them had gone home to family or left town. That left me alone for the final stretch. Most nights were quiet. I'd walk the lot around closing time, count the cash box, and lock the front gate. No one ever came by after 7. Until that Saturday. It was the weekend before Christmas, around 5:30, when a beat-up green Chevy pulled in. One headlight was permanently dim. Rust ate through the wheel wells, and the engine rattled when it idled. The driver didn't wave or roll down his window. He parked, got out, walked straight to the middle row, and pointed at a Douglas fir. He wore heavy gloves, which stood out because it wasn't that cold. Mid-40s, maybe. Thick canvas coat. Old boots. A brimmed cap pulled low. I asked if he wanted the tree trimmed or netted. He shook his head and handed me exact cash, crisp bills folded flat. He didn't say a word. Silence like that isn't unheard of out there. Some people just don't talk. Still, something about him unsettled me. He stood beside the driver's door while I tied the tree to the roof rack. He wasn't watching me so much as standing there, motionless, like he wasn't waiting for the tree at all, just existing next to the truck. His windshield was layered with old toll stickers, sun-faded and peeling. A plastic deer skull hung from the rearview mirror, yellowed and hollow, like a cheap prize you'd win at a fair and forget about. I didn't ask questions. He drove off without a word, and I figured that was the end of it. That night, around 9, I did my usual lockup. The lights were already off when I noticed something wrong. One of the smaller trees from the front row was missing, not the one I'd sold. A different one. Same row, different tag. I assumed someone had stopped by late and another worker had sold it without logging the sale. But the clipboard showed nothing. No entry, no missing cash. I walked the perimeter. The side gate was shut. There were no fresh footprints, just an empty patch where the tree had been. Stealing a tree from our lot wasn't easy. They were heavy. Dragging one away would leave marks in the gravel or slush. But there was nothing. No broken branches, no bent nails. Just one tree gone, like it had never existed. I chalked it up to a mistake and let it go. Monday night, during my final walk before closing, I stopped cold. There was a tree in the empty spot. It wasn't one of ours. The bark was stripped smooth, unlike anything we sold. There was no price tag, no colored twine, no trimming at the base. The trunk was a pale gray, the branches sagging with a dull sheen. It didn't look freshly cut. It looked dead, like it had been drowned. I reached out and touched a branch. I regretted it instantly. It was ice cold and slick, like old meat wrapped in plastic. It clung to my fingertips for a moment and left behind a smell I couldn't place. Not rot, not pine, just wrong. My stomach turned. The lot was completely silent. No wind, no cars. Just that thick stillness you get deep in the hills. I dragged the thing carefully to the burn pile behind the trailer, tossed it on top, locked everything up, and left. The next morning, I passed the pile on my way out. The tree was gone. The other debris was still there, branches crushed beneath scrap wood and cardboard, but the strange tree had vanished. No ash, no needles, no smell, nothing. I didn't tell my aunt. Not yet. That Tuesday afternoon, the green Chevy returned. The man didn't get out or buy anything. He parked at the edge of the lot with the engine running, windows fogged, and sat there. Watching, I kept busy, sweeping and straightening rows, doing anything to avoid looking at him. By 8, he was still there. I called my aunt. She told me not to approach him. Just close up and go straight to the trailer. Make sure everything was locked. When I got there, the trailer door was cracked open. It was an old lock that never sealed perfectly, but I always latched it. Always. The gap made my stomach drop. Inside, nothing looked disturbed at first. Then I saw the kitchen table. The tree was there. The same one I had dragged to the burn pile the night before. It stood upright without a base or water. The bottom was jagged, like it had been torn from the ground. Pine bits and mud were tracked across the linoleum. The air felt thick and humid, as if the tree had brought its own weather inside. The branches were damp. Drops of moisture hit the floor every few seconds. I backed out without touching anything, got in my car, and drove straight into town. I didn't even grab my jacket. I found a diner still open and used the payphone to call the sheriff. I gave them the plate number and told them everything. The deputy listened, but didn't sound convinced. He said it was probably someone messing around, a local playing a joke. Unless the man trespassed or did something clearly criminal, there wasn't much they could do. I didn't go back that night. I checked into a highway motel and barely slept. The next morning, I returned with my aunt. The trailer was spotless. No mud, no needles. I was 21 that winter. The year was 2016, and I thought I wanted to be alone. My name's Evan, and back then I was burned out in that special way only college can do to you. Finals had crushed me. My brain felt fried, and I couldn't stand the noise of people for one more second. That's when my mom's old friend, Diane, offered me the use of her cabin while she went to Arizona to visit her boyfriend. She wasn't family, not really, but she'd known me since I was a kid and trusted me enough to hand over the keys. The cabin was in northern West Virginia, way past where cell service gets spotty and gas stations stop showing up. The kind of place where the trees feel taller because there's nothing else around them. No neighbors, no streetlights. Just woods, hills, and a narrow creek frozen solid at the bottom of the slope. When I pulled in, the driveway curled behind a ridge, and once I parked, the road disappeared like it had never been there at all. That should have been my first clue. The cabin itself was small and old. 2 rooms downstairs, a low loft above, and a wood stove that made loud popping and ticking noises whenever it heated up. Those sounds were comforting at first. Made the place feel alive, like it was settling in around me. That first night, I sat on the couch with a beat-up paperback and a cheap glass of whiskey, listening to the wind tap softly at the windows. It felt peaceful. Too peaceful, maybe, but I didn't question it. After a couple days, I got into a routine. I'd cook something simple, take long walks through the woods, then read until I passed out. Every night, it snowed just a little. Not enough to cause trouble, just enough to cover everything in a clean, quiet blanket. The kind of snow that makes the world feel muted, like it's holding its breath. Christmas Eve came and went quietly. I made pasta, watched an action movie on my laptop, and stayed up later than I meant to. Sometime after midnight, I noticed the fire was dying down. I grabbed my boots and jacket and headed out to the shed for more logs. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. They cut straight through the fresh snow, coming from the tree line down to the shed. Big boot prints. Deep ones. Whoever made them hadn't been wandering. They walked straight to the shed, then straight to the back steps. And then they stopped. No prints going away. No sign of where the person went next. Just an abrupt end, right at the bottom step. I stood there staring way too long, my breath puffing white in the cold. The woods were silent. No animals, no wind. Just that awful quiet that makes your ears ring. I told myself they had to be old. Snow plays tricks, right? Maybe I'd missed them earlier. Still, I locked every door when I went back inside. I shoved the little table in front of the front door too, just to be safe. I tried reading, but my eyes kept jumping to the windows. I barely slept that night. Christmas morning, I checked again. The tracks were still there, clearer than ever, bigger than my boots. Too neat, too straight. I walked around the cabin, checked the shed, even looked under the porch. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was missing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing just outside my view. That afternoon, it started snowing again. Soft flakes drifting straight down. No wind at all. I tried to calm myself by baking cookies using one of Diane's old recipes taped inside a cupboard. The smell helped. I even found a tiny radio station playing scratchy Christmas music, and for a little while, things felt normal again. Then the power went out. No flicker, no warning. Just a quiet pop, and everything died. The radio, the lights, the fridge. The silence that followed felt heavy, like it pressed against my chest. I checked the breaker. Fine. Outside, the power lines looked normal too. No ice, no fallen branches. I told myself outages happen all the time out here, but my skin wouldn't stop prickling. That night, I locked everything and pulled the curtains tight. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Just one. Slow, firm. No footsteps, no crunch of snow. Nothing before it. I froze. I turned off the fire. Killed the flashlight. The cabin went pitch black. Another knock came, exactly the same. I sat there barely breathing when something slid across the window behind me. Not a tap. A slow drag. Like a hand feeling its way across the glass. I grabbed the fireplace poker and ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My phone had no signal. Calling for help did nothing. Sometime after midnight, the radio turned on by itself. A man's voice hummed a Christmas song, soft, close. When morning finally came, I left. I never went back. And I don't spend Christmas alone anymore.